Just enjoy this beautiful piece from Prydz. Just beautiful. So let's take a look. I was sitting, minding my own business, but one of my Patreon asked me to do a remake of a sound from Prydz track that is called OPUS. And I said, okay, I will do it. And while I was listening, I just couldn't resist to make a cover for this track. It's such a beautiful track, really. If you ever listened to it, probably you did. It's just wonderful. It's one of those tracks that doesn't really matter which genre it is. Anybody who listens to it probably will like it. It's that kind of like a glue track, I would say. And I really wanted to make a cover out of it, but I wanted to keep most of the elements same. I just wanted to add a bit like a warmer pads and make the effects slightly different and make my own take on it. And I started like at 9 o'clock today, and now it is 3 o'clock. I'm doing this for 6 hours almost. And I think it tells a lot about the track. Like, it's just, like I said, it's a beautiful track and you really lose the time while working on it. So this will be just me going through different elements because it's a huge project and doing it start to end from scratch will take hours. Like I mentioned, I'm doing this for 6 hours, so I think it's better to just I go through with the different elements and try to like explain the key things in the track. And I do really hope that you would enjoy it as much as I did. So let's sit down and pay some tribute to a progressive house classic. So I made from beginning until the first big drop. I thought this is probably the most interesting part. So let's start with the low end. It's quite simple really, we don't need to spend too much time there. So we have just this simple kick. I will say quite really kind of a basic kick that you will hear a lot in the progressive house. And then we have this kind of driving bass, sounds like this. This is a pigments patch, and I just use like analog together with the wavetable, and wavetable is giving this kind of really gritty part and sounds really warm and nice. The reason is being all these effects as well though. And then we have this guy giving both the super low and the super high, so like covering the rest of the, let's say, frequency range. And then we have a distortion and overdrive. That's the reason we are getting this really warm sound out of it. Just brings the sound to the life. And finally we have a bit EQ here and a bit saturator and the channel EQ to boost those lows a bit more. And of course it's sidechain to kick, and together with the kick sounds like this. Really simple low, and the most of the thing in this track is actually about the leads and plugs and effects and so on. And for the plugs I have a lot of layer, and I wanted to get it close to the original one. It's I think pretty close at the moment, but in the meantime I want to take my own a little bit, like change ever slightly, really slight. And the first layer is the classic Redux layer. I think we should start from the beginning to hear this one, and this is just like a signature sound in this track. So it's kind of bit crashed. And if I take this part, I'm crashing here again with the Ableton Redux, but if we take the original sound, the initial part over here basically out of square waves, so already kind of sounding 8-bit without any effects. So if I turn the effects on plus A, so it's almost already there, simply because, as I mentioned, all these square waves like make it like 8-bit sound. And then we are kind of adding a bit crasher on top of that, a bit fade bokeh and a bit reverb. Sorry, not reverb, multi-filter, just making it like a plug sound. Here the sound gets really warm and I really liked it. And afterwards we are having a simple chain. This one is the original chain. However, I want to have a parallel chain so that I can introduce a bit of harmonics from the Redux. And if I saw this one is really distorted or bit crashed. And then I have this EQ and another EQ, I guess this FAB filter, emphasizing a bit more the highs, but you don't need to really use FAB filter for that. I probably just experimenting a bit. And then we have star layer. This one is actually not star, this one is like a percussive layer, it sounds like this. Change the name. The idea is just making the sound a bit like hitting a bit harder. I'm just using simple kick sample, and I'm taking like this initial part so that it's like pop pop, and adding this on top of the original. Just makes it a bit more dramatic. It almost makes it something like walking and so on. And then we have this star layer. This layer was like easy to hear in the original track. I actually don't know if it is like an Eastern instrument or regular star or anything like that, but I did basically, I just opened the pigments and went to the sample part, and I found the steel acoustic guitar. It's pretty like high pitched, and then did the same thing that I did the original sound, a bit with crashes and so on. This one is a bit more subtle, and then I literally cut off all the lows and took the highs. And together. And then finally I have the low layer, bottom layer. This one is a bit like richer, darker sound. This is not playing all the notes, by the way, it's just playing the lower note. Again, the pigments, I think this one is simple sawtooth triangle in between there, a plug sound, nothing really that much, and all together they sound like this. In the original track it was a bit darker, a bit was more pluckier, but I wanted to have a bit more distortion, a bit more, let's say, modern, so that's the reason that I added this a bit more additional layer on the beginning, or a bit crashed, more crash sound. And I think Pigment's original sounds a bit actually more modern, if that makes sense. And I had actually another bright plug sound, but this one comes in later on in the track to make everything a bit more hyped, so it sounds like this. And this is another Pigment's patch. I think the most important thing over here is actually using this sample to give excitement to the sound. So there's a huge difference between this without this one and with this one. So without it, it doesn't really sound that exciting. And once you add this layer, it is getting to life simply because it's like a more sustained sound. It really gets this high harmonics. And then as usual, we just added a plug envelope. And I cut the super lows. And I think another important thing here is actually really distorting. Like without these guys, it sounds like this. Using the wave folder, overdrive, even though they are really slight, it just adds up and makes the sound a bit more exciting. And a bit flanger there, and compression not doing much. On the effect side, I'm just using a bit reverb, really 8.7%, so it's really just there, and boosting again the highs. And all together in the chorus part or the drop part, it sounds like this. So it gets really nice and exciting. It's not really overly driven, overly bright, but it is still kind of sounding kind of warm and like bright and like enhancing, maybe the right word. And then this is my take, like I wanted the pads a bit warmer, feel a bit more on the low end of the track, especially in the beginning, because I felt like it was a bit too empty. If I provide a bit more ambience, could be a bit like a more ambient-ish, if that makes sense. So what I did, I took this pad sound. It's a simple Pigments patch, really. I'm just moving around with the shape and the between like square wave and sawtooth in both oscillators, but the first one is a detuned 12 semitone, so 1 octave below, and really nice slow envelope. And then I think I have a bit chorus and a bit stereo pan, so moving a bit right and left. And what I mean, if I play the track in the beginning without the pad, you will hear what I try to explain. It almost makes it a bit more dramatic. I really enjoy this type of ambiences, so I just wanted to do my own touch, if that makes sense. And this one is also kind of with my own touch. Like I want to contrast this low pad sound with a super bright high pad sound. So like you have the super low, super highs, and in between you fill up with the plugs. So you are thinking about the frequency range and making it a bit fuller overall. So this one was a bit simple version, really high pitched, and I think I used kind of a sample, but it's in the granular, so it's quite interesting. Again, we are utilizing a lot of harmonics from the original sound, and a bit white noise here. These are like turned down, just adding a bit, blue noise, so super bright, really hard to hear. And then just cutting everything here, so I'm getting super highs only, and together pad sounds like this. And then we have this fun blip blip sound in the background, just make it a bit more joyful or playful, if that makes sense. And then that was from actually a pigment patch. I'm just having this sound, a bit plucky, but with a nice attack on top. And all together. Really, really smooth, I will say, and enjoyable. Let's jump to the claps here, because there's a one trick that I did, and it was from the original track. And it's a really nice trick as well. So the original snare sound was, I think, 707. It's like a very kind of a big room type of clap, sounds like this. Sorry, snare sounds like this. I excited even more with overdrive. But the tail of the snare was actually not a snare tail, it was more like a clap tail. So what I did, I took a clap sound here, sounds like this, and make it like a really wet, and layered on bottom of the snare. So the gate here, it has a bit of attack, so I'm kind of making an envelope there so that the snare hits right there, and then boosting the sound of the clap so that like the clap gets, or snare gets the clap tail. So it sounds like this. It's almost like a waves, weird stuff, but I think it's really nice in the track. And then another important lead sound is this scream loud. This was the sound that my patron was asking me. So the main idea was just doing this, but yeah, the track was so beautiful, I just let it go and did everything. So sounds like this. Quite fun sound, really. A lot of FM synth going on really in this case. So here these are the single triangles, but what is happening, this modulation here is playing here with the function too. It gets quite melodic, quite leadish, quite aggressive as well because of that. And the other thing that I did, I took another function here, function 2, let me do it this way here, and this one is like a almost sidechain. So I put this one into the volume of the oscillator, so the volume goes up and down all the time. It's super fast, you can barely see here. If I click here, you will see that I'm modulating this guy over here, and it sounds like this. Another trick here is actually distorting even more, like without these wave folders and overdrive and flanger. Sounds like this. So it should be this, guys. This one's just make it a bit more focused on the middle part of the sound, like high mids. And the flanger really adds this kind of old school 90s, I would say, the sound. And then here we have also a bit chorus as well. Really, really, really fun sound. It really makes the drop much more entertaining, much more exciting. And then we have this really weird, let's say, effects, the risers. Sounds like this. I just took operator and then just put it into the fixed mode so that I can play with the frequency. It goes up like this. The fun part is actually if you do it in the noise, I think I'm doing it here. Let me play it. the noise almost gets like a, let's say, a wavetable, and it sounds like a converse from noise to a regular oscillator. So that machine sound, it provides really interesting timbre and makes it really interesting. And then I have another one here. So we are raising, triple raising. So it gets like it raises up, and you feel like it's almost there, and then comes another riser, and then finally another riser, and becomes super weird altogether. Like here. Like the chaos and like rising forever. And then I hear just simple snare sounds, really. These guys, and then we did the pads. Let me see if we missed anything else. Close this up. Yeah, I think this is more or less it. And of course the file will be available on Patreon, so you can just go there and download it. But let's start to end, play it, and just enjoy this beautiful piece from Prydz. Just beautiful. So let's take a look. And yeah, that was it. That was a really fun project for me. I hope you enjoy it and I hope you learned something. And if you did, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps a lot. Other than that, I will catch you in the next one. Goodbye.